In 1989, communist regimes began to crumble across Central and Eastern Europe. But in Romania, Nicolae Ceaușescu continued his rule. The communists had come to power in Romania through a rigged election in 1946. Ceaușescu became General Secretary in 1965. He removed rivals and established personal control. He put his wife and other members of his family in positions of power. He developed a personality cult and destroyed a large area of Bucharest to build himself a palace of unprecedented size, even while the rest of his country was in poverty, with food rationed. The population was monitored and controlled by the secret police, the Securitate, which had a large network of informers and agents provocateurs to identify and quash any resistance. Their methods included torture and murder. From the outside, it seemed hard to imagine how this regime could fall. And yet it did. What was the spark that led to the final explosive end of Ceaușescu's rule? Improbably, it started with a single man, a pastor in Timișoara, the second city of Romania. His name was László Tőkés. He did not organize any armed force. All he did was speak. But in communist Romania, speaking could be a brave act of resistance. Zsolt Szilágyi, a student at the time, was going to be introduced to Tőkés.
I was introduced to Mr. Tőkés in 1988 by one of my friends, Mr. Árpád Gazda. And he told me that, okay, next week we go to Mr. Tőkés and you will have the chance to meet him. And one of my colleagues in the student campus told me that, Zsolt, do not go there, it's dangerous. Because I heard, she told me, that this priest, at that time he was only priest, this priest is dangerous, could be dangerous, because he is provoking people, he is listening what they are responding him, and then he maybe reports to the Securitate. So this was a typical diversion, trying to isolate somebody who got a community around him. This was a diversion of the Securitate, that they spread the false news that this priest is working with us.
But Szilágyi met Tőkés and believed he was genuine. Tőkés was daring to criticize a major project of the communist regime in which hundreds of villages were to be destroyed.
In 1988, a group of Protestant priests redacted a protest against the plan of demolition of the Communist Party. The plan was to destroy villages to gain more agricultural lands, but in fact it was a terrible tool, it would be a terrible tool in the hand of the Communist Party to destroy the local communities, the countryside.
Through 1908 and 1989, the pressure on Tőkés to stop making criticisms became more intense. But he did not stop. He agreed to a secret television interview with Canadian reporters in the gallery of his church.
They came here because they thought that both the church and the office is wired, is taped. Hidden microphones are placed there by Securitate, the secret service of the Romanian Communist Party. And they came here because they thought that here there are no wired and no microphone.
Tőkés was ordered to leave his city parish and go to a remote village called Minő. He refused. Then, in July 1989, his interview with the Canadian journalists was shown on Hungarian television.
The TV program could be seen near the border of the country, so a large number of Hungarians and Romanians could receive the program. You have to know that in that time in Romania there remained only 2 hours of TV program each day. full with the Ceaușescu personal cult and nothing more and nothing else. So the people nearby the border was following the foreign TV programs as Yugoslavia and Hungary, and that provoked a large scandalous effect. According to our faith, to not remain silent when even the stones will speak, says Jesus, if you will remain silent.
Immediately the intimidation of him intensified. One of his associates, Erno Ujvarosi, was found dead, believed to have been murdered by or with the approval of the Securitate. Tőkés was attacked in his own flat. His ration book was taken. Still, he did not back down. His faith would not allow him to.
Mr. Tőkés was pressed and was persecuted by the Securitate, but his strongest shield was publicity. Every Sunday he went up and he presented everything what happened last week, because always the Securitate always asked him, this discussion should remain among us. And he always presented for the whole community what happened, what kind of threats he got, and he always asked the spiritual help of the community. And his family was here every week. Another brother or sister was here, coming to not allow him to be alone. That's how to be protected. And in the latest period, when he started to send more and more messages outside, and the Western press media presented its case, then he was practically in house arrest.
Eventually, a court confirmed that Tőkés would have to leave his parish.
Mr. Tőkés said, no, I'm legally here, I want to serve my community. And he was threatened that in this case he will be removed by force. And his bishop asked the help practically of the police to come and to remove him by force.
On the 10th of December, I announced that in the next week will take place the eviction, and I invited the people of my church to come and see and be witness of how to be witness of the abusive eviction in a socialist democratic country of a priest.
And that's how people started to gather here on 15th of December. More and more people came here in the front of the street. The crowd became bigger, and more candles and more people were here. The Romanian Baptists arrived, and they started to sing Christmas songs. And at a certain moment, somebody started to shout, God exists, God exists. So it was a protest against the system, against an atheist system which wanted to erase everything which was spiritual, which was in your soul, which was non-controlled by them. And what was amazing in that moment, that Hungarians, Romanians, Protestants, Baptists, Catholics were together, fighting together for liberty. It's a rare occasion in this part of the world that nations which had confrontation during the centuries, and there is a basic mistrust between nations due to this fact, these territorial disputes, etc., to be able to race together against tyranny, against communism, against the terror. So at that moment, more and more people came. The Romanian believers started to sing Deșteaptă-te române, which became later the hymn of the country. Actually, this is the official hymn of the country. And the Hungarian believers started to sing the Hungarian religious songs. More and more people came. The tram line is very close to this street. So somebody went out to the tram, stopped the train and the tram, and everybody was coming, what's happening here? Of course, people in Timișoara knew that there is a Hungarian priest who is opposing the system. And everybody knew that something's going on here. So there were Romanians and students from the campus who were just coming just to see what's going on here. We heard that something is happening, but we don't know what. Somebody went to the tram, which was stopped, climbed on the platform, yeah, and started and made a short speech saying that, look, in Poland was possible, in Czechoslovakia was possible, in Hungary was possible, why not in Romania? They changed already and nothing happened here. And at that moment, that person said, let's go to the party headquarters and protest. And we said, okay, and everybody started. At that moment, we were hundreds. But when we started, we became thousands. At a certain moment, the people started to shout, we want heat in our houses. We want bread. At a certain moment, a small group started to shout, Gorbachev, Gorbachev. Even Gorbachev was a positive hero at that moment, because he already started the glasnost, the perestroika, to open the system, not to apply the communist terror. So even Gorbachev was a positive hero in the mind of the people at that moment. But that was the very first crowd which started, and sincerely I was looking who is recognizing my face. Because at that moment we did not know whether this would be another uprising like in Brașov in '87. It was a social uprising of the workers, and as far as I know, more than 20 workers disappeared. The leaders disappeared after, never came back. So we were not sure what's going on, but we felt that we should be there. It wasn't a rational decision. The crowd just bringing you, you know. And when we arrived in the front of the party headquarters, we were, I think we were more than 1,000. It's difficult to estimate because, and some people went inside and started to throw out on the windows the party propaganda books and the pictures of Ceaușescu.
The police arrived with helmets and started hitting the crowd, which then fled. In the early hours of the next morning, Securitate agents went to the flat where Tőkés lived and was, that night, supported by friends as well as family. Tőkés went into the church, but the Securitate broke down the door of the church with an axe. Tőkés was arrested at the altar. Árpád Gazda was nearby.
De láttam azt, hogy Lászlót verik, tehát őt akkor már verték, az arcából folyt a vér. Edith végig kiabált, hogy hagyják békén a férjét, és hagyják őket békén. És akkor előttem vezették végül is őket el a templomból, úgy még emlékszem, hogy arra gondoltam, hogy vajon látni fogjuk-e még egymást. Azután ugye a Tőkés házaspárt előbb a Securitate-hoz vitték, aztán onnan Szilágymenyőre. Minket, akik hát a Tőkés Edith sógorát és engemet illetve azokat, akik lent maradtak a lakásban, minket a Securitate-hoz vittek, ahol egy jó félórás intenzív verés következett. A Securitate udvarán egy szakasz katona velünk foglalkozott hetünkkel, és mindenféle válogatott kínzási módszereket kipróbáltak. A Securitate udvarán felsorakoztattak, letérdeltettek, tarkóra tetették a kezünket, és hátulról rúgták a vesénket például. Ez volt egyik módszer. De olyan is volt, hogy lehasaltattak a földre, és egyszerűen gyalogoltak a hátunkon, tehát átmentek a hátunkon. Engem többször is kiszedtek a sorból, mert engem ismertek hetünk közül, egyedül én voltam ismert számukra, mert engem sokszor igazoltattak már korábban is. És kaptam gumibottal az arcomba például, kaptam ököllel, úgyhogy a szemüvegem összetört az arcomon, ököllel a szemüvegembe gyakorlatilag.
Tőkés was taken to Minő by the Securitate. He was told he would be tortured if he did not say that he was a spy working for the CIA and the Hungarian Secret Service. The initial demonstration in Timișoara was followed by demonstrations in other cities and towns. These were killed in Timișoara. Ceaușescu made a speech and was horrified when the crowd booed.
Considerând aceasta ca o
Fighting broke out. The army eventually turned against Ceaușescu, who ran away but was captured and shot. As the tide turned, Tőkés, instead of being tortured by the Securitate, was invited to lunch. At the end of December, the communist regime finally fell. It was replaced by a government that included former communists, but the worst times of terror faded away. And it all began with the bravery of a single man.